A black belt thug brutally attacks a helpless teenager outside a martial arts tournament, demanding the kid bow down and show proper respect to his superior skills. The punk and his crew corner the 17-year-old between parked cars, systematically, beating him down with vicious body shots and joint locks. But the mysterious stranger in the leather jacket stepping out of the shadows isn't just another bystander. This is Steven Seagal himself. The arrogant fighter has no idea he just started a war with a 70-year-old Aikido master who spent decades teaching cops how to neutralize punks exactly like him. While the thug prepares his finishing kick, the legendary action hero moves with that deadly fluid grace that made him famous. The bully's friends think they're watching an easy 3-on-1 beatdown, but they're about to witness why some legends never get old. In seconds, the cocky black belt goes from predator to prey, staring up at the man whose movies he used to mock. What happens when a tournament tough guy picks the wrong victim? Will the bully survive learning that Hollywood's most dangerous man is still very real? What happened next would shatter the thug's arrogance forever. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Saturday afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Colorado State Martial Arts Championship Auditorium, casting long shadows across the packed bleachers. The rhythmic sounds of bare feet on canvas and sharp exhales echoed through the venue as competitors faced off in the semifinals. Tournament coordinator Rita Kowalski moved efficiently along the sidelines, clipboard in hand, her practiced eye scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. That eye in the back row, partially hidden in shadow, a figure sat alone. The man wore a weathered, black leather jacket despite the warmth inside, his long gray-streaked hair tied back in a simple ponytail. His piercing dark eyes tracked every movement in the ring below with the intensity of someone who understood violence on a level most spectators never would. Rita noticed him during a break between matches, feeling she should recognize the weathered face, but the name eluded her. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next semifinal match," the announcer's voice boomed across the auditorium. In the red corner, representing Dragon's Claw Dojo, Kyle the Dragon Brennan, a stocky 23-year-old, with reddish-brown hair, bounded into the ring, multiple black belt patches decorating his GI. He raised his arms to acknowledge the cheers, his green eyes gleaming with confident arrogance. Kyle shadowboxed briefly, his movements sharp and aggressive, designed more for intimidation than warming up. And in the blue corner, competing unaffiliated, Marcus Rivera, the lean 17-year-old who entered the opposite corner, couldn't have presented a starker contrast. His simple white GI bore no patches or school insignia, just honest wear from countless hours of solitary practice. Marcus's warm brown eyes showed determination that belied his modest appearance, but his movements revealed the telltale signs of self-taught technique. Fundamentally sound, but lacking the polish of formal instruction, the mysterious figure in leather leaned forward slightly as the two fighters touched gloves. Something about the younger competitor's earnest focus had captured his attention. The match began with Kyle immediately pressing his advantage, using superior technique and experience to control the pace. Marcus fought valiantly, his natural athleticism and heart keeping him competitive longer than anyone expected. But skill eventually triumphed over determination. Kyle's final combination, a perfectly timed sweep followed by a submission hold, ended the match decisively. As Kyle celebrated with excessive showboating. Playing to the crowd's approval, Marcus picked himself up from the canvas with quiet dignity. No excuses, no complaints, just the respectful bow of a true martial artist accepting defeat. The contrast between winner and loser couldn't have been more telling. The stranger in the back row watched Kyle's arrogant celebration with growing interest, particularly noting how the victor seemed to relish his opponent's disappointment. When Kyle approached Marcus near the competitor check-in area after the official results were announced, the leather-jacketed figure quietly rose from his seat. Rita's voice crackled over the PA system as she announced the final tournament results and thanked participants. Families began filing toward the exits, the late afternoon Denver sunshine visible through the opening doors. But the mysterious observer wasn't following the crowd. He was tracking two specific individuals making their way toward the parking lot. Something told him this tournament's real drama was just beginning. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tournament venue's parking lot as Marcus Rivera walked alone toward the bus stop, his gym bag slung over his shoulder and his jaw still tender from Kyle's final strikes. The excitement and noise from inside the building faded behind him, replaced by the distant sounds of families loading cars and heading home. "Hey, kid." Marcus turned to see Kyle Brennan approaching with two companions, both wearing the same black GIs with red trim from Dragon's Claw Dojo. The stockier of the two was Brad Kowalski, Rita's nephew, whose cruel smile matched Kyle's perfectly. The third was Mike Patterson, heavily muscled and silent, positioning himself to block any escape route toward the street. "Going somewhere." Kyle's tone carried none of the sportsmanship expected after competition. "We're not done talking." Marcus shifted his weight, instinctively recognizing the predatory formation surrounding him. "The match is over. You won fair and square." "Fair and square." Kyle laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think stepping into that ring with me was fair? You think wasting my time with your YouTube karate was showing proper respect?" The three black belts had maneuvered Marcus between two parked cars, cutting off his exit routes. Kyle stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell the arrogance radiating from him like cheap cologne. "Here's how this works, kid. You're going to bow to me, a real bow, like you should have done before embarrassing yourself in there. Then you're going to apologize for thinking you belonged in the same ring as a real fighter." Marcus straightened, his shoulders, his father's voice echoing in his memory. "Respect is earned, Mijo, not demanded." "I respect your skill," Marcus said carefully, "but I won't apologize for competing. Everyone has to start somewhere." Kyle's face darkened. "Wrong answer." The first shove came without warning, sending Marcus stumbling backward against a car's bumper. When Marcus tried to regain his balance, Kyle was already moving, throwing a sharp punch to his solar plexus that doubled him over, gasping. "Still feeling proud of your performance?" Kyle grabbed Marcus's shirt, pulling him upright before delivering a calculated strike to his ribs. "Maybe this will teach you about knowing your place." Brad and Mike watched the beating with cruel amusement, occasionally glancing around to ensure no witnesses approached. Kyle's attacks were methodical, body shots that would hurt without leaving obvious facial damage, joint twists that brought flashes of agony without permanent injury. This wasn't random violence. It was systematic humiliation. Marcus fought back courageously, managing to land a few defensive strikes, but he was hopelessly outmatched. His self-taught techniques crumbled against Kyle's superior training and experience. When his gym bag spilled open, revealing homemade training equipment and worn martial arts books held together with tape, Kyle's laughter turned vicious. "Look at this. Books and a jump rope? Did you think you could learn fighting from a library?" Kyle grabbed a handful of Marcus's hair, forcing his head back. "Last chance, kid. Bow down and apologize, or I finish what that tournament ref interrupted." Blood trickled from Marcus's split lip, but his eyes remained defiant. "No." Kyle drew back his leg, preparing a devastating kick to Marcus's ribs that would put him down for good. The motion was precise, powerful, designed to cause maximum pain. "That's enough." The voice cut through the parking lot with quiet authority, stopping Kyle's kick mid-motion. All three attackers turned toward the sound, seeing a figure emerge from the shadows between two SUVs. The man moved with measured steps, his weathered leather jacket catching the late afternoon light, but Kyle's foot remained frozen in the air as he processed the interruption, his concentration broken by the stranger's calm presence. The stranger stepped into the circle of light cast by an overhead lamp, and for the first time, his features became clearly visible. He appeared to be in his early 70s, with long gray-black hair tied back in a ponytail and sharp, weathered features that spoke of decades spent in serious pursuits. His dark eyes held the kind of depth that suggested he'd seen too much violence and knew exactly how to stop it. Without introduction or demand for explanation, the man simply placed himself between Kyle and Marcus, his movement so fluid it seemed effortless. Kyle, still balanced on one foot from his interrupted kick, found himself facing this unexpected obstacle. "This doesn't concern you, old man," Kyle snarled, lowering his leg but maintaining his aggressive posture. "Walk away." Instead of responding with words, the stranger merely waited. Kyle, emboldened by having his friends present and irritated by the silent challenge, threw a hard right cross aimed at the older man's head. The punch never landed. Kyle found himself stumbling forward as the stranger simply wasn't there anymore, having moved aside with minimal effort while catching Kyle's wrist in what looked like a gentle grip. The subtle twist that followed sent Kyle spinning past his intended target, his own momentum carrying him off balance. Brad rushed in next, attempting a charging tackle. What happened next defied belief. The gray-haired man seemed to barely move. Yet Brad suddenly found himself airborne, landing hard on the asphalt with a hip throw that was textbook perfect in its execution. The impact drove the wind from his lungs, leaving him gasping and disoriented. Mike approached more cautiously, recognizing that they weren't dealing with an ordinary senior citizen. His wariness proved justified but ultimately futile. A lightning-fast strike to his shoulder, so quick it was barely visible, left his entire right arm numb and useless, hanging limp at his side. What the hell? Mike stumbled backward, testing his unresponsive limb with growing panic. Kyle regained his footing, shaking out his wrist where the stranger had controlled him. Frustration and embarrassment fueled his next attack, a spinning back kick he perfected through years of tournament competition. Surely this old man couldn't handle real martial arts technique. The stranger caught Kyle's leg as easily as he might catch a thrown ball. Kyle felt pressure applied to a nerve point behind his knee, pressure that sent lightning bolts of agony shooting up his leg. He cried out and collapsed to one knee, trapped by the older man's grip. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. 3 trained martial artists lay defeated or disabled, while their opponent stood calmly beside Marcus, not even breathing hard. Every movement had been pure Aikido, circular motions that redirected energy rather than meeting it head-on, precise joint control that neutralized aggression without causing permanent damage. Marcus stared in amazement from where he'd fallen, blood still trickling from his split lip. He'd just witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. An elderly man dismantling 3 younger, stronger opponents with what looked like gentle guidance rather than violent combat. Kyle writhed on the ground, testing his leg gingerly as sensation slowly returned. When he looked up at his rescuer for the first time, really seeing the weathered face and long gray hair, his eyes widened with shocked recognition that a bitter laugh escaped his lips, tinged with disbelief and vindictive satisfaction. Steven Seagal, the washed-up action hero. The name hung in the air like a revelation. Marcus's jaw dropped as he stared at the man who'd just saved him. The same face he'd watched countless times on his father's old DVDs, now lined with age but unmistakably recognizable. Kyle's laughter grew more confident as recognition replaced confusion. You think your movie tricks work in real life, old man? This isn't Hollywood. Kyle struggled to his feet with help from Brad and Mike, both of whom were nursing their own injuries and eyeing Steven Seagal with newfound wariness. Despite being thoroughly outmaneuvered, Kyle's face contorted with a mixture of pain, humiliation, and something that looked almost like vindictive glee. Steven Seagal. Kyle repeated the name like a curse, spitting it out with mock reverence. I saw above the law when I was 12 years old. You were already past your prime then. He flexed his shoulder, testing his mobility while keeping his distance from the legendary martial artist. Seagal helped Marcus to his feet, checking the teenager for serious injuries while keeping one eye on the 3 young men. His movements were gentle with the boy, a stark contrast to the devastating efficiency he'd displayed moments before. You got lucky with some parlor tricks, Kyle continued, his voice growing more confident as he regained his composure. But this is reality, not a movie set. No stunt doubles here, no choreographed fights. Marcus stared up at his rescuer with undisguised amazement, still processing that his childhood hero had just saved him from a brutal beating. The surreal nature of the situation left him speechless. One moment, he was about to be seriously injured. The next, he was standing beside a legend he'd only known from flickering screens. Brad and Mike flanked Kyle, but they maintained their distance, clearly having learned respect for Seagal's capabilities. The older man's calm presence seemed to fill the space around them, making the parking lot feel smaller and more charged with potential violence. I'll give you this much, Kyle said, rolling his shoulders and testing his range of motion. You're faster than I expected for someone your age. But speed only gets you so far. Without warning, Kyle launched himself forward with a technique that caught even Seagal off guard. Instead of the traditional martial arts approaches he'd used before, Kyle employed a hybrid style, modified Krav Maga strikes combined with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu footwork that created unpredictable angles of attack. His elbow connected solidly with Seagal's ribs, the impact sending a shock of pain through the older man's torso. A follow-up knee strike glanced off Seagal's hip, and for a moment, Kyle's youth and unorthodox approach gave him a genuine advantage. Seagal absorbed the hits without falling, but the successful strikes were clearly felt. Kyle's grin turned triumphant as he backed away, having proved his point about the difference between movie fights and real combat. "You're not the legend you used to be, are you?" Kyle taunted, noting how Seagal favored his left side slightly. 20 years ago, maybe you could have handled all three of us. But that was 20 years ago. Marcus started to step forward, instinctively wanting to help his rescuer, but Seagal raised a hand to stop him. The gesture was subtle but authoritative, making it clear that this confrontation wasn't over and interference wouldn't be welcome. Before the situation could escalate further, car headlights swept across the parking lot as a security guard began his evening rounds. Kyle and his companions quickly reassessed their situation, recognizing that continued public violence would bring unwanted attention. "This isn't over, movie star," Kyle called back as the three began moving toward their own vehicle. "You just made yourself a target. And next time, there won't be any security guards to save you." Brad and Mike followed their leader toward a black SUV parked at the lot's far end, both casting nervous glances back at Seagal. They'd been expecting an easy beatdown of a helpless teenager, not a confrontation with a martial arts master who'd just demonstrated that age hadn't dulled his edge as much as they'd assumed. Kyle paused at his car door, his earlier confidence returning now that escape was assured. "Enjoy your moment of glory, old man. But remember, I landed shots on the great Steven Seagal. That's more than most people can say." As their SUV pulled away, Seagal stood quietly beside Marcus, one hand pressed gingerly against his bruised ribs. The teenager looked up at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern, still struggling to process the reality of his situation. The parking lot fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic, leaving two unlikely allies to contemplate what had just transpired and what might come next. Seagal and Marcus stood alone in the now quiet parking lot, the distant hum of Denver traffic replacing the earlier sounds of violence. Marcus stared in disbelief at his rescuer, still processing that Steven Seagal had just saved him from a brutal beating. "Are you hurt badly?" Seagal asked, his voice carrying genuine concern as he examined the teenager's injuries. His touch was gentle but professional, checking for signs of serious damage beneath the obvious bruises. "I'm okay," Marcus replied, though his ribs ached with each breath. "But he actually hit you. Are you all right?" Seagal nodded, though he still favored his left side slightly. "I've taken worse hits. That boy has some skills, I'll give him that. Not many people catch me off guard anymore." Marcus shook his head in wonder. "I can't believe this is real. I mean, you're Steven Seagal. I grew up watching your movies with my dad. He always said you were the real deal, not just another action star." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Seagal observed, noting the past tense Marcus had used. "What does he do?" The teenager's expression clouded. "He was a Denver police officer, Roberto Rivera. He died 2 years ago, killed during a domestic violence call." Seagal's demeanor shifted, his respect for the boy deepening visibly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Police work is dangerous business. Your father died protecting others." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "He always said that was what mattered, using your strength to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's why I wanted to learn martial arts. But I can't afford real lessons, so I teach myself from books and videos." Seagal glanced at Marcus's scattered training equipment, homemade weights, worn books held together with tape, and a jump rope that had seen better years. The sight spoke of determination born from necessity, the kind of drive that couldn't be bought or taught. "You entered that tournament hoping to win prize money for training?" Seagal guessed. Marcus nodded, embarrassed. "Stupid, right? I thought maybe if I could win a few matches, I'd have enough to join a real dojo. Guess I learned the hard way that YouTube videos don't make you a fighter." "You've got heart," Seagal said firmly. "And you've got the fundamentals right. Your balance is good, your timing isn't bad. You just need proper instruction." He paused, considering something. I knew some Denver police officers years ago. I used to help train them in defensive tactics. Maybe I knew your father. Marcus's eyes lit up with sudden hope. Really? His name was Roberto Rivera, badge number 247. He worked downtown patrol mostly. Let me give you a ride home, Seagal offered, concerned that Kyle might return. We can talk more about your father on the way. And maybe I can meet your mother. I'd like to make sure she knows what happened here today. Marcus hesitated, still overwhelmed by the surreal turn his day had taken. You don't have to do that. I can take the bus. I insist, Seagal said gently but firmly. That young man and his friends might come back, and you shouldn't be alone until we know their intentions. They gathered Marcus's scattered equipment and loaded it into Seagal's modest rental car. As they drove through Denver's evening traffic, Marcus stole glances at his famous passenger, still hardly believing this was happening. Seagal's rental car pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Gardens Apartments, a modest but well-maintained complex in a working-class Denver neighborhood. Marcus led him up 2 flights of external stairs to apartment 2B, the teenager moving stiffly from his earlier beating but maintaining his dignity. Elena Rivera answered the door wearing blue medical scrubs, her warm features immediately shifting to concern as she noticed Marcus's bruised face and split lip. She began fussing over him in rapid Spanish before switching to English when she noticed the older man standing behind her son. Marcus, what happened? Are you hurt? Her practiced eye cataloged his injuries with the efficiency of someone accustomed to medical emergencies. Mama, I'm okay, Marcus assured her, switching between languages as he explained the parking lot incident. When he introduced Steven, Elena's dark eyes widened with recognition, not from movies, but from something deeper. She disappeared into the apartment without explanation, returning moments later with a framed photograph that made Seagal's breath catch. The picture showed a group of Denver police officers in uniform, standing outside the police academy. In the background, clearly visible, was a younger Steven Seagal demonstrating defensive techniques to a circle of attentive officers. Roberto, Elena said softly, pointing to a handsome Hispanic officer in the front row. He talked about you all the time. The Aikido master who taught them how to control situations without unnecessary violence. He said you saved his life more than once. Seagal studied the photograph, memories flooding back. Roberto Rivera. I remember him now, good student, asked thoughtful questions about de-escalation techniques. He really listened when I talked about using minimal force to maximum effect. Elena's eyes filled with tears. He always said you taught the officers something special. Not just how to fight, but how to protect people without becoming the thing they were fighting against. He credited those lessons with helping him come home safely for 15 years. She invited Seagal inside for coffee, and he accepted, touched by the connection to Roberto's memory. The apartment was small but immaculately clean, filled with photographs of happier times. Roberto in uniform receiving commendations, family vacations to the mountains, Marcus's school achievements displayed with obvious pride. Roberto would have been so grateful to know you were looking out for Marcus. Elena continued as she served coffee in mismatched but cherished cups. Since he died, Marcus has been trying to be the man of the house. Too much responsibility for a 17-year-old. Seagal listened as Elena shared stories of Roberto's police work, how he'd used the Aikido principles in numerous situations, calming domestic disputes, subduing violent suspects without serious injury, protecting his fellow officers through tactical awareness rather than brute force. He always said the most important lesson you taught was knowing when not to fight, Elena explained. That real strength was about protecting others, not proving yourself. Marcus sat quietly, absorbing these stories about his father that he'd never heard before. Seeing his dad through Seagal's perspective, as a student and fellow protector, gave him new understanding of Roberto's legacy. Your husband was a good man, Seagal said finally. He understood what martial arts are really about. Marcus has that same spirit. He just needs proper guidance to develop it. As Seagal prepared to leave, Elena walked him to the door. Marcus has been struggling since Roberto died, she confided quietly. He's trying so hard to be strong, to take care of me, but he's still just a boy. He needs someone who understands what his father stood for. The unspoken request hung between them, and Seagal found himself nodding. I'll be in Denver for a few more days. Maybe I could spend some time with Marcus. if you'd like. Elena's grateful smile was answer enough. The next morning, Seagal sat in his downtown hotel room reviewing airline reservations on his laptop, planning to extend his Denver stay by several days. The connection to Roberto's family had stirred something in him, a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. That a commotion in the parking lot below drew his attention to the window. For floors down, Kyle Brennan stood beside a black SUV with 3 other men, all wearing matching black GIs with the red insignia of Dragon's Claw Dojo. Kyle spotted Seagal in the window and pointed up at him while speaking animatedly to his companions. The hotel room phone rang moments later. Kyle's voice carried through the receiver, cocky and confrontational despite the previous day's defeat. Decided to stick around and play hero movie star? Good, because I've got something to prove. Seagal listened silently as Kyle explained that word of their encounter had spread through Denver's martial arts community. Questions were being raised about whether the great Steven Seagal was still capable of backing up his legendary reputation, or if yesterday had been a lucky fluke against unprepared opponents. Here's the deal, Kyle continued, his tone growing more aggressive. Tonight, you're going to prove yourself at a place called The Forge. It's where real fighters go to test their skills against serious competition. No rules, no referees, no movie magic, just pure martial arts. I'm not interested in proving anything to you, Seagal replied calmly. Kyle's laughter held a menacing edge. This isn't optional. You embarrassed me in front of my students yesterday. Now I'm going to return the favor in front of people who matter. The Forge, 10 o'clock tonight. He provided an address in Denver's industrial district. And if I decline, then maybe we'll pay another visit to your little friend Marcus. Kids walk home from school alone every day. Accidents happen. Sometimes bullies don't have heroes conveniently nearby to save them. The threat was clear without being explicit. Kyle had done his homework, learning Marcus's routines and vulnerabilities. The implication hung heavy in the air. Refuse the challenge, and the teenager would pay the price. You have until tonight to decide, Kyle concluded. But really, what choice do you have? The great Steven Seagal, afraid to face a real fighter? That story would spread pretty fast through the community. The line went dead, leaving Seagal staring at the phone. He immediately called Elena at the hospital where she worked, warning her about the potential threat. She assured him she would pick up Marcus directly from school and keep him close until this situation was resolved. Seagal spent the rest of the day researching the Forge online, but found little concrete information, just vague references to underground fighting in Denver martial arts forums. The few mentions suggested it was a serious operation, not some back-alley brawl club that A.S. Evening approached. He prepared mentally for whatever awaited him. This wasn't about pride or proving himself. Kyle had made it about protecting Marcus. And if Roberto's son was in danger, Seagal would do whatever necessary to keep him safe. He dressed simply in dark clothes that allowed for movement, checked his rental car's GPS for the address Kyle had provided, and headed into the Denver night. Whatever the Forge turned out to be, he would face it on his own terms, guided by the same principles he'd tried to teach Roberto and his fellow officers years ago. Sometimes protecting others required walking into danger, even when you knew it was a trap. The GPS led Seagal through Denver's industrial district to what appeared to be an abandoned textile warehouse near the South Platte River. But the parking area told a different story. Dozens of expensive cars and motorcycles suggested this was no derelict building. Inside, Seagal discovered that the Forge was far more sophisticated than Kyle's description had implied. The warehouse had been completely renovated into a professional fighting venue, complete with a regulation-sized ring, stadium lighting, electronic betting stations, and tiered seating for over 200 spectators. This was no amateur operation. Someone with serious money and connections had created a first-class facility designed to host high-stakes combat sports. The crowd was an eclectic mix: wealthy thrill seekers in expensive suits, hardcore martial arts enthusiasts, and obvious criminals who radiated the kind of menace that came from lives spent in violence. Kyle waited in the center of the ring, now wearing a pristine black GI with red trim. His confident smirk suggested he felt completely at home in this environment. Professional cameras were positioned around the ring, and digital displays showed betting odds heavily favoring the younger fighter. As Seagal moved through the crowd toward the ring, he felt eyes tracking his movement. Conversations paused as spectators recognized him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Many seemed to view him as a has-been celebrity trying to recapture past glory. Steven, Elena Rivera's voice cut through the crowd noise as she hurried toward him, looking panicked and out of place in the hostile environment. "Thank God you're here. Something's wrong." She explained that she'd received a phone call at work, a calm, professional voice explaining that if Seagal didn't fight tonight, Marcus would be visited again. But this caller knew details that chilled her blood: Marcus's school schedule, their apartment layout, Elena's work shifts, even which route Marcus took walking home. "They've been watching us," Elena said, her voice trembling with controlled fear. "This isn't just about Kyle's pride. Someone's been planning this." She showed Seagal a cell phone photo that had been texted to her, Marcus walking home from school that afternoon, taken from close range without his knowledge. The message was unmistakable. They could reach the boy anytime they wanted. Elena pulled out the old photograph of Roberto with his police unit, pointing to Seagal in the background. "Roberto always said you taught him that sometimes a man has to fight not because he wants to, but because people he cares about depend on him." Seagal studied the photograph, then looked at Kyle waiting confidently in the ring, surrounded by cameras and a crowd hungry for violence. The elaborate setup, the professional equipment, the sophisticated betting operation, none of this could have been organized overnight. Someone had been planning this encounter since before the tournament, using Kyle as bait to draw him into something much larger. He handed the photograph back to Elena and removed his leather jacket. "Stay close to the ring where I can see you," he instructed. "And if things go wrong, get to the exits immediately." As he approached the ring, Seagal realized he wasn't just walking into a fight. He was walking into a trap that had been carefully constructed around his desire to protect Roberto's family. But knowing it was a trap didn't change the fundamental equation. Marcus was in danger, and the only way to protect him was to play along until he understood who was really pulling the strings. The crowd's energy reached fever pitch as he climbed through the ropes to face Kyle. But Seagal's mind was already working beyond this immediate confrontation, trying to identify the real enemy hiding behind this elaborate theater of violence. Seagal climbed through the ropes into the ring as the crowd's energy reached a crescendo. The arena's professional lighting cast harsh shadows across the canvas, while multiple camera angles captured every detail for what was clearly a sophisticated broadcast operation. A professional announcer with a wireless microphone worked the crowd like a seasoned showman. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Forge, where legends are tested and pretenders are exposed." The introduction of Kyle the Dragon Brennan brought thunderous cheers from spectators who clearly knew his reputation. Kyle played to the audience, shadowboxing and flexing while digital displays showed heavy betting action. 8-1 odds against the 70-year-old challenger and his opponent. The announcer continued with theatrical skepticism. "From Hollywood, California, the former action star Steven Seagal." The crowd's response was mixed, some appreciative cheers, but mostly boos and derisive laughter from spectators, who viewed him as a washed-up celebrity attempting to prove himself against legitimate competition. Several audience members shouted insults about his age and movie career. Elena watched nervously from ringside, clutching her phone and scanning the hostile crowd. The betting stations buzzed with activity as odds shifted slightly based on last-minute wagers from spectators who remembered Seagal's reputation. But the overwhelming money favored Kyle's youth and tournament credentials that a referee in a striped shirt explained the rules with professional efficiency. 3 5-minute rounds, victory by knockout, submission, or referee stoppage. Medical staff stood by with equipment that suggested they'd handled serious injuries before. Kyle approached during the referee's instructions, speaking just loud enough for nearby cameras to capture his words. "I studied all your movies, old man. I know every move you've got. But this isn't choreographed, and there's no stunt double to take the real hits." The bell rang, and Kyle immediately went on the offensive, throwing combinations designed to overwhelm his opponent quickly. His strategy was clear: end this fast before Seagal could settle into any rhythm. The crowd roared approval as Kyle appeared to dominate the opening exchanges. But 30 seconds into the fight, the arena fell silent. Kyle had thrown a powerful haymaker right hand, committing fully to the knockout punch. Seagal simply wasn't there anymore. He'd moved aside with minimal effort, while catching Kyle's wrist in what looked like a gentle grip. The subtle adjustment that followed controlled Kyle's entire arm, sending him to his knees with a perfectly applied joint lock. The crowd's cheers died as they witnessed something they hadn't expected: precise, devastating technique that made Kyle's tournament skills look crude by comparison. This wasn't movie choreography. This was real martial arts mastery on full display. Kyle writhed in the joint lock, his face contorting with pain as Seagal applied controlled pressure to his wrist and elbow. The technique was textbook Aikido, using the opponent's force against them while maintaining complete control of the engagement. From ringside, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit watched with obvious interest, signaling to security personnel positioned throughout the crowd. The evening's entertainment was exceeding expectations, and someone was taking careful note of every detail. Seagal released the joint lock and stepped back, allowing Kyle to regain his footing in the center of the ring. The younger fighter shook out his arm, surprised by both the effectiveness of the technique and the control Seagal had shown in applying it. Kyle's strategy shifted immediately. No more reckless haymakers. He began using more cautious footwork, attempting to tie up Seagal in grappling exchanges where his youth and strength might provide advantages. But every time Kyle committed to an attack, Seagal redirected his energy with effortless precision. The crowd watched in fascination as Kyle's tournament-tested techniques proved ineffective against pure Aikido principles. A spinning back kick became a hip throw that sent Kyle tumbling across the canvas. A charging combination punch became an armbar that nearly forced an early submission. Kyle's speed and conditioning meant nothing when Seagal controlled the timing and distance of every exchange. "What the hell?" Kyle muttered after finding himself on the canvas for the third time, his usual confidence beginning to crack. Elena watched from ringside with growing amazement. This was the man Roberto had described in stories, not just a fighter, but an artist, who made violence look like a dance. Every movement flowed naturally into the next, creating a seamless display of technique that seemed to violate physics. The crowd's hostility gradually shifted to grudging appreciation. These weren't movie moves or stage choreography. This was authentic martial arts mastery that few spectators had ever witnessed in person. Even the most skeptical observers couldn't deny they were watching something special. Kyle grew increasingly frustrated as the second round progressed. His carefully planned attacks were not just being defended, they were being transformed into opportunities for Seagal to demonstrate superior technique. Each failed assault left Kyle more off balance and desperate. In the third round, Kyle's desperation led to tactical errors. He attempted a diving tackle, hoping to bring the fight to the ground where wrestling might give him an edge. Seagal sidestepped smoothly, caught Kyle's extended arm, and flowed into a textbook armbar that left the younger fighter with no choice but submission or serious injury. Tap, tap. Kyle's hand slapped frantically against the canvas as pressure mounted on his elbow joint. The referee stopped the fight immediately, raising Seagal's hand in victory. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Boos from those who'd bet heavily against the underdog, but substantial cheers from martial arts purists who recognized they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Kyle remained on the mat, staring at the ceiling, in disbelief. His entire worldview had just been shattered by a 70-year-old man who'd made his black belt skills look like amateur flailing. From ringside, the well-dressed man who'd been watching so intently approached the ring with obvious interest. Danny Kozlov moved like someone accustomed to command, his expensive suit and confident bearing suggesting significant authority within this organization. Several security personnel converged on his position as he signaled them, their movement coordinated and professional. Whatever Kozlov had seen in Seagal's performance, it had clearly exceeded his expectations. The evening's real business was about to begin, and Kyle's humiliation had merely been the opening act for negotiations that would determine whether Seagal walked away from the forge or became permanently entangled in whatever criminal enterprise was operating behind its professional facade. Danny Kozlov entered the ring as Kyle was helped to his corner by his teammates, the promoter's businessman, smile masking keen intelligence as he approached Seagal with an extended hand. "Impressive demonstration," Kozlov said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to making deals. "Danny Kozlov, I run the forge. That was quite a clinic you put on tonight." Seagal shook the offered hand while studying Kozlov's expensive suit and calculating eyes. Everything about the man suggested serious money and professional criminal connections, from his perfectly manicured nails to the way security personnel deferred to his presence. I appreciate authentic martial arts, Kozlov continued, not the sports entertainment that passes for fighting these days. Our clients value genuine skill over flashy showmanship. You'd be surprised how many wealthy individuals are willing to pay premium prices to witness real combat between masters. While listening to Kozlov's pitch, Seagal noticed details that contradicted the image of a simple underground fight club. Professional camera crews had recorded the entire match from multiple angles, their equipment worth more than most commercial productions. Security personnel wore expensive earpieces and moved with military precision. The betting systems operated through sophisticated electronic networks that suggested international connections. We could offer you a spot on our regular cards, Kozlov explained, mentioning purses in the five-figure range for skilled fighters willing to compete against hand-selected opponents. Our operation books events for discriminating clients who appreciate artistry over brutality. I'm not interested in regular competition, Seagal replied diplomatically. I only fought tonight to resolve a personal matter. Kozlov's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened slightly. That's unfortunate. The Forge has developed extensive connections throughout the martial arts community. Word travels fast in our circles, and reputation matters. It would be regrettable if stories spread suggesting that Steven Seagal was afraid to face legitimate competition. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Cooperate or face systematic damage to his reputation through whatever networks Kozlov controlled. Elena approached the ring as this conversation continued, her expression showing concern about the obviously dangerous men surrounding them. I noticed several people taking photographs during your fight, Elena whispered to Seagal, as Kozlov stepped away to consult with associates. One man approached me asking questions about Marcus, his school, his schedule, whether he walks home alone. Seagal felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. The surveillance of Marcus hadn't been Kyle's amateur effort. It was part of a larger operation with resources and reach that extended far beyond a single underground fighting venue. Kozlov returned with a business card and renewed pressure. Think about our offer, Mr. Seagal. We host events twice weekly, always with full houses of enthusiastic spectators. The money is excellent, and the competition would be worthy of your abilities. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Elena noticed two black SUVs with tinted windows positioning themselves near the exit. We're being followed, she said quietly, pointing out the vehicles that made no effort to hide their surveillance. The message was clear, the Forge's interest in Seagal extended beyond a single exhibition match. Someone with serious resources wanted him involved in their operation, and they weren't above using Marcus as leverage to ensure his cooperation. Walking to his rental car under the watchful eyes of multiple surveillance teams, Seagal realized he'd won the fight but lost something more important, the luxury of walking away from this situation. Whatever criminal enterprise operated behind the Forge's professional facade had identified him as either an asset to be recruited or a threat to be eliminated. The next morning at Elena's apartment, Seagal found Marcus practicing Aikido forms. In the living room, attempting to replicate movements he'd witnessed at the Forge the night before. The teenager's enthusiasm was evident, but his self-taught technique needed significant correction. Your balance is off, Seagal observed gently, adjusting Marcus's stance. Aikido isn't about force, it's about harmony. Feel the energy, don't fight it. Elena served coffee while watching from the kitchen doorway as Seagal began teaching Marcus proper fundamentals. The sight of her son learning from a genuine master, someone who had trained with Roberto, brought tears to her eyes. Like this, Marcus attempted a basic throw using couch cushions as a practice partner. Better. Remember what I told you about using your opponent's momentum. In Aikido, we don't create force, we redirect it. Seagal demonstrated the principle using subtle movements that made complex techniques look effortless. Marcus proved to be a natural student, absorbing instruction with the hunger of someone who'd been teaching himself for years. His self-discipline was evident, but Seagal provided the technical knowledge and philosophical framework that YouTube videos couldn't supply. Your father understood these principles, Seagal explained as they worked on basic joint locks. Police work requires the same mindset, controlling dangerous situations with minimum necessary force, protecting everyone involved, including the aggressor. Their training session was interrupted by Elena's phone ringing. Danny Kozlov's smooth voice filled the kitchen as she put the call on speaker. "Mrs. Rivera? I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I represent the Forge, where your friend Steven performed so admirably last night." Elena's expression hardened as she recognized the voice from Nightmares, the same professional tone that had threatened Marcus the day before. "We have another opportunity for Mr. Seagal," Kozlov continued. "Tommy Reeves, a former professional MMA fighter, has specifically requested a match. The purse would be $15,000, enough to change a family's circumstances significantly." Marcus looked up from practicing throws, his eyes widening at the mentioned sum. $15,000 would pay off Roberto's medical bills, cover Marcus's college applications, and provide opportunities they couldn't currently afford. "Steven doesn't need to fight for money," Elena replied firmly, though her voice betrayed her awareness of how desperately they needed those funds. "Of course not," Kozlov agreed smoothly. "But several of our clients were quite impressed by his performance last night. They've specifically requested to see him compete again. Disappointing such valuable business associates could have unfortunate consequences for everyone involved." The implication hung in the air like a physical presence. Refuse, and Marcus would face consequences that went far beyond schoolyard bullying. After hanging up, Seagal looked at Elena and Marcus, seeing the financial stress they'd hidden behind pride and dignity. Roberto's medical bills from his final hospital stay were crushing them slowly, and Elena's nurse's aide salary barely covered basic expenses. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said quickly. "We'll manage somehow. We always do." But Elena understood the reality better than her 17-year-old son. $15,000 would transform their lives, and refusing Kozlov's offer might eliminate any future opportunities for Marcus permanently. "Roberto always said sometimes we have to take calculated risks to protect what matters most," Elena said quietly. "If you're willing to fight again, we'll support whatever decision you make." Seagal nodded, understanding that his choice would determine not just his own fate, but the future of Roberto's family. The Forge had chosen their leverage expertly, making it impossible to refuse without abandoning people who depended on him. That evening, the Forge buzzed with significantly more energy than the previous night. Word had spread through Denver's underground about Seagal's dominant victory over Kyle, drawing curious spectators and serious bettors from across the region. The crowd was larger, more upscale, with several faces that suggested wealth and influence. Tommy Reeves presented a completely different challenge than Kyle Brennan. At 30 years old, standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 215 pounds of lean muscle, the former UFC competitor commanded immediate respect from the audience. His professional record of 18-4 included victories over ranked opponents before contract disputes ended his mainstream career. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice carried newfound respect as he introduced both fighters. "Tonight we witness a clash between old-school mastery and modern mixed martial arts evolution." The betting odds reflected the upgraded competition, only 3-1 against Seagal, with substantial money backing both fighters. Digital displays showed international betting action, confirming Elena's suspicions that these fights were being broadcast to paying audiences worldwide. Reeves received thunderous applause from spectators who knew his reputation. Unlike Kyle's showboating, the former professional carried himself with quiet confidence, acknowledging the crowd briefly before focusing entirely on his opponent. "No disrespect intended," Reeves said during the referee's instructions, "but I've studied your techniques. Traditional arts versus modern MMA. Let's see which philosophy survives." The opening bell revealed immediately that this would be a different kind of fight. Reeves understood distance and timing in ways Kyle never had, using lateral movement and feints to avoid overcommitting to attacks. His takedown attempts were technically sound. His striking combinations followed proven MMA strategies. Seagal found himself pushed harder than he'd been in years. Reeves' grappling background allowed him to defend against some joint lock attempts, while his conditioning meant he could maintain pressure throughout extended exchanges. This wasn't the frustrated aggression Kyle had displayed. This was calculated, professional combat. The crowd watched a fascinating chess match between philosophical approaches to fighting. When Reeves shot for takedowns, Seagal sprawled and redirected his momentum. When Reeves threw combinations, Seagal moved off angles and countered with joint manipulation. Neither fighter could establish sustained dominance. "You're better than I expected," Reeves admitted between rounds, showing the professionalism that had made him successful at the highest levels of competition. Elena watched with growing anxiety as the fight extended into the third round. This wasn't the technical clinic Seagal had provided against Kyle. This was a genuine test against a world-class opponent who refused to be controlled easily. The decisive moment came when Reeves, frustrated by his inability to land clean shots, attempted a flying knee strike that represented his best chance for a knockout. The technique was perfectly executed with devastating power behind it. Seagal caught the incoming knee, off-balanced Reeves in midair, and flowed smoothly into a standing arm triangle that compressed the carotid arteries with surgical precision. Reeves tapped immediately, understanding that unconsciousness was seconds away. The crowd erupted in appreciation for both fighters, recognizing they'd witnessed genuine artistry from two masters of their respective crafts. Even in defeat, Reeves showed class, raising Seagal's hand and acknowledging the superior technique. But from ringside, Danny Kozlov's expression suggested the evening's entertainment was just beginning, and Seagal's impressive performance had attracted attention that extended far beyond the warehouse walls. The next day, Elena used her lunch break at Denver General Hospital to meet with Detective Frank Morrison at a small cafe near the medical complex. Morrison, a 20-year veteran with Roberto's old unit, had maintained contact with the Rivera family since Roberto's death. "Frank, I need your advice about something dangerous," Elena began, keeping her voice low despite the cafe's busy atmosphere. She explained the situation with the Forge, the pressure being applied to Seagal, and her growing fears about Marcus's safety. Morrison listened with the focused attention of an experienced investigator, recognizing patterns that troubled him deeply. "Elena, what you're describing sounds like organized criminal activity. Underground fighting with that level of sophistication doesn't operate independently." He pulled out his phone, showing her a federal task force bulletin he'd received the previous week. "The FBI has been tracking a network of illegal fight clubs suspected of money laundering, human trafficking, and international gambling operations. The money involved suggests connections to major criminal organizations." Elena felt her blood chill as Morrison described recruitment methods used by these operations. Sometimes voluntary participation for promised rewards, sometimes coercion through debt or family threats, sometimes outright kidnapping of promising young fighters. "The fighters often become trapped in cycles they can't escape," Morrison explained. "Debts that never decrease, threats against family members, addiction problems that are deliberately cultivated. It's modern slavery disguised as entertainment." He showed Elena surveillance photos from other cities where similar operations had been discovered. "See the professional equipment? The international betting networks? This isn't local crime. This is part of something much larger." Morrison's expression grew more serious as he studied Elena's description of the Forge's setup. If Seagal keeps fighting for them, he's not just risking his own safety. He's being drawn into a network that eliminates problems permanently. "What can we do?" Elena asked, though she suspected the answer wouldn't be simple. "Officially, I can increase patrol presence around Marcus's school and your apartment complex. Unofficially, these organizations have resources and connections that make them extremely dangerous to cross. The best protection is often cooperation until law enforcement can build cases strong enough to bring them down." Morrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Roberto died protecting innocent people from dangerous criminals. If you get involved in this fight, you need to understand that you're potentially facing the same kind of threats he dealt with as a police officer." Elena stared at the federal bulletin, seeing Roberto's face in every young fighter whose life had been destroyed by criminal exploitation. How long would it take to build a case against them? Months, maybe years. These operations are sophisticated, with legal fronts and political connections. They don't survive by being careless or obvious. As Elena prepared to leave, Morrison handed her his card with personal numbers written on the back. "Call me if anything escalates. And Elena, tell Seagal that Roberto's old unit remembers what he taught us about choosing the right battles at the right times." Driving back to the hospital, Elena understood that protecting Marcus meant making impossible choices between immediate safety and long-term consequences. The Forge wasn't just threatening her family. It was part of a criminal network that destroyed lives for profit, and walking away might not be an option they would allow. Roberto had faced similar decisions throughout his police career, choosing when to risk everything to protect innocent people. Now Elena had to decide whether she was ready to make the same sacrifices her husband had made in service of justice. That evening at the Forge, Seagal prepared for his third fight against Jake, the Mauler Williams, a 265-pound former heavyweight boxer whose reputation for brutal knockouts had drawn the largest crowd yet. The warehouse was packed beyond capacity, with overflow spectators watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. Williams was a mountain of muscle and scar tissue, his face bearing the accumulated damage of 20 years in professional boxing. Unlike Kyle's arrogance or Reeves' professionalism, Williams radiated pure menace. A man who had built his career on ending fights violently, the fight proved to be Seagal's most challenging yet. Williams' size and reach created problems that technique alone couldn't solve immediately. But Aikido principles adapted to the heavyweight's pressure, with Seagal using superior footwork and joint manipulation to control a much larger opponent. The crowd watched in fascination as David versus Goliath dynamics played out in real time. Williams' power meant nothing when Seagal controlled distance and timing, turning the boxer's aggression into opportunities for throws and joint locks that gradually wore down the larger man's conditioning. That Seagal's victory came through a technically brilliant sequence where Williams' charging attack was redirected into a standing arm triangle that forced submission despite the massive size difference. The crowd's appreciation was genuine. They'd witnessed something extraordinary. But as Seagal exited the ring, a figure from his past approached with the confident bearing of someone who owned everything around him. Vincent Nakamura appeared. To be in his early 50s, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit that couldn't hide the predatory grace of his movement. "Sensei," Nakamura said with mock reverence, using the Japanese term for teacher while his eyes held no respect whatsoever. "It's been a long time." Seagal studied the face that had changed with age but remained unmistakably familiar. "Vincent, I should have known you were behind this." "Behind it? I created it." Nakamura's smile was cold and calculating. "Did you think the Forge just happened? That Kyle's attack on your young friend was coincidence? I've been watching you for years, waiting for the right opportunity to prove what your teachings really create." Elena watched from ringside as the two men faced each other, recognizing immediately that this was the real confrontation. Everything else had been preparation for this moment. 30 years ago, you expelled me from your dojo for using Aikido to permanently injure opponents," Nakamura continued. "You said I had corrupted the art's philosophy, but I simply acknowledged what you were too hypocritical to admit. Martial arts create killers who pretend to be peacekeepers." Nakamura gestured around the warehouse with obvious pride. "I've built this empire to demonstrate the truth about combat arts. No philosophy, no pretense of nobility, just honest violence for honest money. Every fighter you've defeated here proves my point about Aikido's true nature." "You've proven nothing except your own corruption," Seagal replied quietly. "Have I? Then prove me wrong." Nakamura's challenge carried the weight of years of planning. "Face me in single combat under traditional rules. No time limits. No referee interference. Fight until one opponent cannot continue. If you win, the Forge closes permanently and all recruited fighters go free. If I win, you become my featured attraction, proving to the world that Aikido philosophy is meaningless against superior technique." Before Seagal could respond, Nakamura revealed his ultimate leverage with casual cruelty. "Oh, and your young friend Marcus is currently enjoying our hospitality. He's safe and unharmed, naturally, but his continued well-being depends on your cooperation." Elena's gasp confirmed what Seagal already knew. Marcus had been taken, and refusing Nakamura's challenge would mean the boy's death. Elena's panicked phone call reached Seagal as he left the Forge, her voice breaking as she explained that Marcus had never come home from his after-school job at Morrison's grocery. His supervisor confirmed that 3 well-dressed men had arrived claiming to be family friends picking him up for a surprise dinner with his mother. Racing through Denver's night streets, Seagal and Elena checked every location Marcus frequented. grocery store, his school, the public library where he studied, the park where he practiced martial arts alone. No one had seen him since the three men arrived at his workplace. "This is my fault," Elena said, tears streaming down her face as they drove frantically between locations. "I should have kept him closer. I should have seen this coming." "This is Nakamura's fault," Seagal corrected firmly. "He spent years planning this moment, using everyone around me as pieces in his game." Elena's phone rang with Nakamura's number. His voice was calm and professional as he provided specific instructions. Seagal had 48 hours to prepare for their final confrontation. The fight would take place at a location of Nakamura's choosing, under his rules, with no outside interference permitted. "To demonstrate my sincerity," Nakamura continued with mock courtesy, "I'll allow you to speak with your young friend." Marcus's voice came through the phone, scared but trying to sound brave. "I'm okay. There are a lot of other people here, other fighters, I think. Some of them are really young, maybe 15 or 16. The brief conversation confirmed Seagal's worst fears. Nakamura wasn't just running underground fights, he was trafficking young people into forced combat for international audiences. Marcus had stumbled into a much larger criminal operation. Detective Morrison arrived at Elena's apartment after she reported the kidnapping, bringing disturbing updates from the FBI task force. "We've been tracking Nakamura's network for 2 years. He operates dozens of facilities across the country, with hundreds of fighters trapped in what amounts to modern slavery." Morrison explained the scope of the operation: young people recruited through gambling debts, drug addiction, or outright kidnapping, then forced to fight in increasingly brutal matches for online audiences paying premium prices for authentic violence. "The money involved is staggering," Morrison continued. "We're talking about millions of dollars in revenue, with connections to international crime syndicates. Nakamura has resources that make him extremely dangerous to cross." Elena stared at Roberto's photograph on the mantel, remembering her husband's stories about facing dangerous criminals who threatened innocent people. "What would Roberto do?" "Roberto would want you safe," Morrison replied. "But he'd also understand that sometimes protecting one person requires stopping a threat to many others." Elena made her decision with the clarity that came from absolute necessity. She retrieved Roberto's service weapon, a .40 caliber Glock 22 that had protected him through 15 years of police work, and placed it in Seagal's hands along with Roberto's badge. "Bring my son home," she said simply. "Do whatever you have to do, but bring him home." Seagal accepted the gun and badge, understanding that he was now fighting not just for Marcus or Elena, but for every young person trapped in Nakamura's network. The stakes had escalated beyond personal combat to a battle for the soul of martial arts itself. Morrison coordinated with the FBI task force for potential rescue operations, but warned that Nakamura's resources and paranoia made traditional law enforcement approaches extremely dangerous for the hostages. Seagal prepared for what might be his final battle. He knew that 48 hours would determine whether Nakamura's corruption of martial arts philosophy would triumph, or whether the true principles of Aikido could still protect innocent people from those who would exploit them. Seagal spent 24 hours preparing at Takashi Dojo with the elderly sensei who had known him from police training days. Through rigorous kata practice and meditation, he prepared mentally for potentially killing Nakamura, a choice that conflicted with Aikido philosophy but might be necessary to save Marcus. Sometimes protecting innocence requires terrible choices. Master Takashi explained during tea. "Your student has corrupted everything Aikido represents." Elena arrived with Roberto's service weapon and badge. Detective Morrison brought disturbing FBI updates. Thermal imaging showed 30 people inside Nakamura's fortress-like steel mill facility. Nakamura called with coordinates for their final confrontation, promising international broadcast of Seagal's defeat to prove Aikido philosophy meaningless. At 3 a.m., Kyle Brennan arrived at Seagal's hotel with his traumatized sister Jessica, who had escaped Nakamura's trafficking operation after 6 months of forced fighting. Her hollow-eyed appearance told the story of systematic abuse and exploitation. Kyle confessed his role in the conspiracy. Nakamura's people had recruited him to draw Seagal into the forge, promising advancement and money. Only Jessica's disappearance made him realize the operation's true nature. Jessica provided crucial intelligence about facility layouts and security procedures. Elena accepted Kyle's desperate apology, remembering Roberto's belief in redemption for those willing to fight for it. Together, they planned a coordinated assault on Nakamura's steel mill fortress to rescue Marcus and dozens of other captive fighters. The team infiltrated the massive steel mill complex at sunset. Kyle and Jessica created diversions at the east entrance while Seagal approached the main building. Inside, he discovered Nakamura's global broadcasting empire, cameras, satellite uplinks, and millions in betting revenue from international audiences. Following Jessica's intelligence, Seagal found 23 captive fighters, including Marcus, held in converted storage areas. The rescue began smoothly until Kyle's diversion triggered facility-wide alarms, and Jessica was recaptured. Steel shutters sealed all exits as knockout gas pumped through ventilation systems. Nakamura's voice echoed over PA systems. "Bring the boy to the arena, or watch all these children die slowly on my cameras." Seagal faced an impossible choice. With innocent lives hanging in the balance, trapped with 23 weakened fighters and knockout gas filling the facility, Seagal led a desperate escape through maintenance tunnels toward the main arena. The journey became a running battle as guards tried to recapture the prisoners. Marcus and the other captives showed remarkable courage, urging Seagal to fight Nakamura rather than sacrifice himself for them. The FBI's premature arrival triggered defense systems that turned the facility into a death trap. Seagal used improvised weapons and Aikido principles to neutralize guards while protecting the weakened fighters. Two collapsed from gas exposure during the fighting retreat. Reaching the bulletproof arena, they found Nakamura waiting calmly. Digital displays showed 100,000 international viewers paying to witness the ultimate test of martial arts philosophy. The circular arena, 50 feet in diameter and surrounded by bulletproof glass, served as the stage for the ultimate confrontation between martial arts philosophy and its corruption. Digital displays showed over 100,000 international viewers and betting totals exceeding $15 million as knockout gas gave both fighters approximately 8 minutes before unconsciousness. Nakamura removed his expensive suit jacket, revealing a traditional black GI that mocked everything the garment represented. 30 years ago, you expelled me for using Aikido to permanently injure opponents, he declared to the global audience. I simply acknowledged what you were too hypocritical to admit. Martial arts create killers who pretend to be peacekeepers. His philosophical assault preceded physical combat, explaining how he'd built a global network showcasing honest violence without spiritual pretense. Around the arena's perimeter, Marcus and the rescued fighters watched desperately through the barrier, their faces showing exhaustion but desperate hope. Seagal stood calmly in simple dark clothing, a stark contrast to Nakamura's theatrical presentation. The gas already affected everyone's breathing and coordination, making every movement require increased effort. "When I defeat the legendary Steven Seagal," Nakamura announced, "the world will see that Aikido philosophy is meaningless against superior technique and honest intention." The final battle for Aikido's soul was about to begin. With less than 6 minutes of consciousness remaining, Nakamura struck first with hybrid techniques specifically designed to counter Seagal's defensive principles. His combination incorporated karate striking, jiu-jitsu grappling, and Krav Maga aggression, anti-Aikido methods developed through 30 years of systematic preparation. Surprised? Nakamura taunted, pressing his advantage with calculated strikes that forced Seagal backward. "I didn't waste 3 decades brooding. I used them productively, learning how to destroy everything you represent." The gas affected both fighters, but Nakamura's superior conditioning and strategic energy conservation gave him pronounced advantages. His attacks came from unexpected angles, incorporating pain compliance methods that violated every principle of honorable combat. Seagal found himself fighting defensively for the first time in decades, his usual energy redirection insufficient, against techniques specifically designed to counter that strategy. Around the arena, Marcus pressed against the bulletproof barrier, watching his mentor struggle against an opponent who anticipated every defensive move. "This is what your teachings really create," Nakamura declared, landing solid hits. "Students who learn to control others through pain and domination." The The philosophy is just window dressing on techniques designed to break people. The psychological warfare was as calculated as the physical assault, exploiting Seagal's commitment to protecting others as potential weakness, Marcus's desperate cry. He taught you how to fight, but he never taught you how to be a man. Cut through the arena with devastating clarity, crystallizing everything at stake in this confrontation between honor and corruption. With 90 seconds of consciousness remaining, Seagal abandoned purely defensive tactics, demonstrating Aikido's full spectrum, not just peaceful redirection, but the warrior spirit that protected innocence by stopping evil completely. This wasn't about meeting corruption with corruption, but showing that martial arts philosophy could overcome its perversion. Nakamura's ultimate technique, designed to cripple Seagal's hands while leaving him conscious to witness mass murder, became his own defeat. As he committed fully to the sadistic maneuver, Seagal used his opponent's momentum and the arena's lighting rig to redirect the attack into a devastating counter. The throw sent Nakamura crashing into the facility's main electrical panel. His desperate attempt to reach explosive detonators brought him within range of damaged high-voltage equipment, trapping him against sparking systems. This is what happens when technique serves evil rather than good, Seagal said quietly as both fighters collapsed from gas exposure. The philosophical victory was complete. Aikido principles had overcome their corruption through genuine understanding of what the art represented. 6 months later, the Roberto Rivera Memorial Martial Arts Center buzzed with activity as 43 regular students practiced Aikido under Seagal's patient guidance. The community facility, funded by donations and federal grants, served kids from challenging backgrounds similar to Marcus's original circumstances. Marcus, now 18 and college-bound on a full scholarship to study criminal justice, helped teach younger students with natural ability inherited from his father. Feel how the movement flows when you don't force it. He encouraged 10-year-old Maria Santos. Aikido works with energy, not against it. Kyle Brennan led intermediate classes, his transformation from bully to dedicated instructor serving as daily proof that people could change. Jessica worked as a trauma counselor, using her trafficking survival experience to help other young people recover from exploitation. Elena managed operations while Detective Morrison visited regularly, bringing officers to learn de-escalation techniques based on Aikido principles. The program combined martial arts training with academic support, job placement, and family counseling. During demonstrations for visiting dignitaries, Seagal explained the center's mission: "We're not training fighters, we're training protectors who understand that real strength serves others." Roberto's memorial plaque read, "He taught us that courage is using your strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The legacy continued. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.